SMI confirms that Bristol will be returning in 2023 in the spring. Gray Biff will be back this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway, and the Bristol TV ratings have come out, and they are pretty good. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight to those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start with the paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is David Ragan's 2022 Envision scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. This paint scheme is all right in my opinion, but I will say it's really cool to see that Envision is stepping up to play and sponsor David Ragan. It's an alright look at paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2022 Walmart Fight Hunger scheme that I believe we're going to see this weekend or later this year in 2022. I absolutely love the Walmart stepping up to the plate and sponsoring Justin Allgaier. This paint scheme is all right in my opinion, but I am very happy to see that Walmart is coming in and sponsoring Justin Allgaier. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Brown's 2022 Trade the Chain scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega, and I think a couple other races as well. Really cool that Brandon Brown has another sponsor that's not the same as that other sponsor we're not going to talk about, but it's really cool to see that Trade the Chain is sponsored this weekend. More sponsorship for him. Great to see that for sure. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2022 Wawa Classic Waffle scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. I absolutely love this paint scheme. I'm not a big fan of the gray, though, but I will say the front of the car looks really good. You've got a colorful front. Just I wish the gray wasn't on it. I think it looks a little bit plain, but I think it's overall a pretty good-looking paint scheme, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2022 Jockey scheme that we're going to see in 4 races in 2022. It was also announced that Jockey is going to sponsor Trackhouse for multiple years, and like I said, they'll sponsor him for 4 weekends, and they'll sponsor Daniel Suarez for 2 weekends as well. I know some people don't really like this paint scheme, but I actually really do like this paint scheme. It gives me very patriotic feels, and I love that they did a really good job, and I think Kyle Sykes has generally done a really good job on the paint scheme this year, and this one is no exception, in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Cole Custer's 2022 Jason Luffer Throwback scheme that we're going to see at the Darlington Throwback Race. Now, this does look like 2003 car that we saw when the car came around 2003, but I do like that he's throwing back to his hero, Jason Luffer. I think this actually is a pretty good looking paint scheme in my opinion. I think it's one of the better throwbacks we've seen this year. Throwbacks are getting better and better, and I love this throwback in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Byron's 2022 Jeff Gordon 2007 Throwback scheme that we're going to see at the Darlington Throwback Race. This paint scheme absolutely is one of my favorite paint schemes I have seen so far. Probably my favorite one I've seen so far this year. It looks like a 2007 car. The number really doesn't take up. Really, it doesn't affect the car too much. And I think this paint scheme looks great. I'm so happy they're finally going and doing one of my favorite Nat liveries of all time. Really excited about that, and I absolutely love that paint scheme, to be honest with you. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Hailie Deegan's 2022 Bobby Allison Throwback scheme that we're going to see at the Darlington Throwback Race. Very similar to the Bobby Allison car from the 1970s and the 1980s. I think this looks really good, did a really good job, and I'm glad that Waste Equip was able to incorporate their way into the sponsorship game. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Almirola's 2022 IHOP scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. I think it's absolutely awesome IHOP is stepping up and sponsoring Eric Almirola this weekend. IHOP, of course, a massive chain. There's been so many cool sponsors that are coming in. Of course, Wendy's sponsoring Noah Gragson, and now you've got Eric Almirola being sponsored by IHOP. I think that's awesome, and I'm looking forward to see this paint scheme out on the racetrack at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is BJ McLeod's 2022 Motorsports game scheme that we're seeing this weekend at Talladega. Not a big fan of the company. I will say the scheme looks pretty good, but I'm not overall the big fan of the company that is sponsoring. There's been a lot of shady stuff going on behind the scenes I really can't get into, but this paint scheme does look pretty decent in my opinion. Hopefully we'll see a good one for BJ McLeod this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brett Moffitt's 2022 Mark Martin Throwback scheme that we're going to see at the Darlington Throwback Race. This looks really cool in my opinion, very similar to Mark Martin's, I think, 02 numbers from back in the day when he drove the 02 car in the 1980s and the early 1980s. It's really cool that Mark Martin, they're throwing back to Mark Martin, a legend of our sport. Happy to see that for sure. We've seen a couple of Mark Martin throwbacks, glad Mark Martin is getting the recognition. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Matt DiBenedetto's 2022 Sterling Marlin Throwback scheme that we're going to see at the Darlington Throwback Race. I absolutely love this throwback scheme. I will say it's not as good as I think it was Landon Castle's 2019 scheme, if I'm not mistaken. I like that paint scheme a lot more than this one, but really actually not too much. I think did a really good job on it. Sterling Martin also retweeted that. He seemed very, very pleased and happy with that scheme. So I hope it does really, really good, and I hope it will get a good run in the Darlington throwback race with Matt DiBenedetto. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2022 Raise Energy scheme that we're going to see in multiple races this year, including, I believe, at Talladega Super Speedway. This paint scheme looks really, really cool in my opinion. Pretty excited to see the Raise Energy's coming on, a newer company that is coming up to the ranks. Really excited about that for sure. I'm glad that Raise Energy is stepping up to play and sponsoring him this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2022 Tony Stewart throwback scheme, which is a throwback to Tony Stewart when he raced in the 2001 Indianapolis 500. I think this looks really cool in my opinion. It's not absolutely picture perfect similar, but I will say it's cool that he's basically going back to Stewart, which is now his boss. I think it's really cool to see that he's throwing back Tony Stewart. Really awesome to see that for sure. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chandler Smith's 2022 Charge Me scheme that we're going to see, I believe, in all three of his races that he is going to race in the Xfinity Series this season. Really cool that Charge Me's jumping up from the Truck Series up to the Xfinity Series when Chandler Smith's debut, of course, is upcoming weekend at Talladega. Really excited to see that for sure, and I'm glad that Chandler Smith will have Charge Me this weekend. And the final paint scheme that we're taking a look at today is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Kroger Sunny D scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Talladega. This is a very, very similar scheme to other paint schemes he has had this year, but it's got a little bit of difference on it, which again, I'm not a big fan of the Kroger being infiltrated with Sunny D. I think it's not as good as what it used to be, especially when Stenhouse drove the number 17, but it is cool that Sunny D is still working with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Portland Xfinity Series race, as that has a title sponsor now, as the title sponsor is going to be called the Pacific Ocean Office Found Automation 147. Of course, that's how many miles the Portland race is going to be. The NASCAR Xfinity Series is going to be going to Portland this year. I'm very, very excited about that race. It's a race I've kind of been looking forward to for quite a bit of time, and I'm definitely very happy to see that they're going there this year. I absolutely love that they've got that as a sponsor for the event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Jeff Gluck poll for Bristol. As the Jeff Gluck poll for Bristol, you would think the ratings for that are really, really high. Well, the Jeff Gluck poll got a very, very mixed review, as it was the second lowest rated Jeff Gluck poll this year, with a 61.2% of people that said yes. Now, I think there's a couple reasons why the poll is a lot lower than normal, because honestly, I would have wished this race was in the 80 to 90% range, so I thought it was really, really good. Number one, I think they absolutely could have done a better job on the procedures. We'll get into that later when we get into the story of Bristol late in this episode, but I think that's one thing they absolutely can do going forward. The next thing is a lot of people probably that were just for Concrete Bristol all around for both races being Concrete Bristol, but you do have to have Bristol Dirt Race for better attendance, and you do have to have it for better ratings. So, in my opinion, that is the Jeff Gluck poll for this week, from this past weekend at Bristol Dirt. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ally. As Dale Jr. has a new endorsement deal with Ally. What this means is they'll have an endorsed deal from Alex Bowman's paint scheme for the national race, very similar to what they did last year. They will have an endorsement deal with Ally for that event. They also will have endorsement deals for some of his cars, the Dirty Mo Media, among other things that Dale Jr. is being a part of. It's very, very cool to see that Dale Jr., of course, is a former driver of the 88 for Hendrick Motorsports, and of course, a winner of 2 Daytona 500s, and just recently raced with Junior Motorsports. I think it's awesome that Ally is working now, not only just with Alex Bowman, but also working with Dale Jr., also with Jimmy Johnson as well. We've been seeing the Ally family grow, and I think the Ally family is going to stay for many, many years. Just the fact that Ally is partnered up with Dale Jr., I think the future for Alex Bowman has been set for a very, very long time, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Logitech. As it was announced this morning that Logitech is elevating its endorsement deal with Bubba Wallace into an official partnership with 2311 Racing and Denny Hamlin. Assets include branding on Hamlin and Wallace's fire suits, and on the number 23 Toyota, plus 10 esports liveries for 10 races with the esports series that you will see this year. Logitech, of course, had somewhat of a partnership last year with Bubba Wallace. In fact, I believe they did sponsor Bubba Wallace at the second Pocono race, if I'm not mistaken, where Bubba Wallace picked up his first top 5 5 of the 2022 season. And now they're partnering up with Denny Hamlin as he joins the Logitech family. I think it's really awesome to see Logitech is stepping up to the plate and they are working with him this weekend. Very excited to see that for sure. And like I said, I cannot 1000% wait to see Logitech and that paint scheme as well, as I think that paint scheme is going to look really, really awesome, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Hillman Jr. As Mike Hillman Jr. is going to be crew chiefing for Shane Lee this weekend at Talladega. Mike Hillman Jr. has been working for many years in the NASCAR Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series as a crew chief. But not only that, I believe he's also been working as an owner in the Cup Series in the past as well. Mike Hillman Jr. I believe was the crew chief this past weekend for Joey Logano in the Truck Series, where he was able to finish in the top 10. And I do think that Mike Hillman Jr. does have potential to do really, really good this weekend as a crew chief. I think Mike Hillman Jr. is a really, really talented crew chief, and I think, like I said, I think he's going to do really, really excellent and a really, really good job being a crew chief this weekend for Shane Lee. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Kenseth. As Matt Kenseth competed in the Boston Marathon this weekend, and in the 50 to 54 class, he finished 141st out of, I think, like 5,000 people who competed in that class. He finished the event in 3 hours, 1 minute, and 40 seconds, which is 8 minutes faster than what Jimmie Johnson competed in. Matt Kenseth is absolutely incredible what he's been able to do here. And he's older than Jimmie Johnson. It seems like he's a little bit more fit than Jimmie Johnson nowadays. But it's very cool to see that some of these drivers are going out and doing incredible things and racing in the Boston Marathon. That's actually one of my dream things to do as when I get older, is actually compete in the Boston Marathon when I do get older. I think that's absolutely one of my dreams to do that. But it's really awesome to get to see one of my heroes and drivers I grew up watching get to compete in the Boston Marathon and complete that in 3 hours. For a guy that's almost 50 now, it's really, really awesome. I'm glad to see Matt Kenseth was able to complete the Boston Marathon, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Music City GP. As the Music City GP has made some changes to the restart zone going forward for the Music City GP at Nashville. It was announced by, I believe it was Nathan Brown who announced this, and says that the restart zone has been moved to the areas where the race starts coming over the bridge. Last year, if you watched the Music City Grand Prix, there was a lot of times when they restarted the event where basically they were getting jumping to start way too early, and cars were really getting stacked up. And as they're about to go green, they had cars running to the back of each other. I mean, one of the cars the car that ended up winning was involved in one of the early wrecks in the Music City GP. So I'm glad that they decided to make the decision overall. I think it's very important for them to make a decision like that, and I think it's a good call that you decided to do that. So really great to see that for sure, and like I said, happy that they made that decision. It needed to happen, and like I said, I'm very happy to see that they decided to make that decision to go ahead and do that. I think that's a great decision they made, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Briscoe. As Chase Briscoe revealed earlier on Tuesday that he's going to be planning to do 25 dirt track races here in 2022, including this weekend at the Talladega Short Track. While Chase Briscoe currently competes in the NASCAR Cup Series, one thing he's absolutely known for is being an excellent and a great dirt racer. He's never won the Chili Bowl, but he's won some big events, and now he'll be competing in multiple different classes, including late models. He'll be racing in midget cars and racing in different classes where he'll be able to compete in that. I think it's awesome when Chase Briscoe is going out and trying different series and trying out new things. And it's good to see that he's going out in different forms, because it's going to keep him in focus, considering he's had a pretty good year this year. I know that the finish wasn't great at Bristol Dirt, but he did end up having a great run there. I think that Chase Briscoe is a very talented and a very, very gifted driver. And like I said, I'm very happy to see that Chase Briscoe is doing it. I think that's something that's really, really important to drivers continue to do this, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Goodyear tire test that took place today. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Out of nowhere, it was officially revealed, Goodyear basically revealed on their social media page, that there was a Goodyear tire test that was happening today at Charlotte. Bubba Wallace from Toyota at 2311 Racing, Cole Custer from Ford with Stewart-Haas Racing, and Ross Chastain, the Chevy driver from Trackhouse, were the three drivers that tested at Charlotte. It's really unclear what they were testing. I know it's a Goodyear tire test. They maybe were testing maybe some new components and maybe some ways to make the racing better. But if it's to make the intermediate racing better, I really don't want that, because the intermediate racing this year has been really, really strong and has been really, really exciting. So in my opinion, I do love that they are doing that Goodyear tire test. I think it's absolutely important that they do that. And like I said, I think, again, the Goodyear tire test is absolutely important Do not get me wrong, but again, I hope it's not to fix the racing because I think the racing at intermediates is great. Yes, the flat tire situation may can improve. I feel like it's improved over time, but I'm glad to see that they had that test. I think it's important to have testing, don't get me wrong, but I'm kind of shocked a little bit about that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Natalie Decker. As Natalie Decker is going to be driving a 13 for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Natalie Decker, of course, has driven in the NASCAR Xfinity and the Truck Series in the past and has made, I think, 1 or 2 attempts this year. She did attempt at Auto Club earlier this year and Daytona earlier this year, but did end up DNQ'd. No, not Auto Club. She attempted at Daytona, but unfortunately DNQ'd. And she did actually make the race, and Martinsville was so far off the pace. I think she ended up going like 20 or 30 laps down in the event. And the crew chief and the spotter just seemed absolutely frustrated with her in the way that she was performing. Natalie Decker does have some good stats at Super Speed, especially in the Truck Series. The Truck Series were their only top 10 coming at coming at Daytona. Here's the thing, though. I'm not just saying this because of her talent. I don't think the 13 car is going to make the show. And I'll tell you why I don't think the 13 car is going to make the show. The 13 cars show no pace and no speed, and with it being single car qualifying that's going to be happening in this, she will not probably be able to make the show. I think there's a lot of good cars out there. There's some good cars, I think, that are going to fail the show, but I believe that she, unfortunately, will not be able to make the show this year at Talladega. I think that's just my honest opinion, though, but I don't think she makes the show, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Cup Series race at Bristol Dirt. Now, interesting, something that brought up by Joseph Strictly, that the Cup Series race at Bristol, which he always does these really cool statistics after every race. You definitely should go check him out on Twitter if you haven't followed him yet. But he says that the Cup Series race at Bristol is the slowest average speed in NASCAR history, with the average speed being 34.97 miles an hour. While NASCAR has continued to get faster and faster over the years, it's so crazy to see that the slowest NASCAR Cup Series race in history is a race at Bristol and a race in 2022. You would think that we probably would have never gotten to this point ever again, but there were a lot of pace slaps in this race that really played a role into that, and we didn't always have the greatest green flag racing. We had a lot of rain showers and stuff. We did eventually get the race going and got the race in and saw that incredible finish. I found that stat really, really interesting, though, that we saw probably the slowest speed for a race here in NASCAR Hit Cup Series history. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Sieg. As Kyle Sieg is going to drive the 39 for RSS Racing this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Kyle Sieg, the brother of Ryan Sieg, we'll get into Ryan Sieg here in just a minute, where he'll be driving this weekend, but I think it's cool they're giving Ryan Sieg the opportunity to drive the flagship car. I'm not sure if this will be the absolute flagship car this weekend, or the 38 is going to be the flagship car this weekend, since the guy driving this weekend is the flagship driver, but I think Kyle Sieg is a pretty decent driver. His guys actually had some pretty decent runs. I don't think the cars have been the greatest for him, but the guys had some decent runs this year, and I'm very happy that Kyle Sieg is getting another opportunity. He'll be in the 39 car this weekend for RSS Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as speaking of which, we're talking about Ryan Sieg, as Ryan Sieg is going to drive the 38 for RSS Racing this weekend at Talladega. Ryan Sieg, of course, who currently drives full-time the 39 for the first time this year, will be driving the 38 car. And it's great to see that the 38 car is back with RSS Racing this weekend. I believe Ryan Sieg is very capable of winning here at Talladega this weekend, especially since it's a Dash for Cash race. And Ryan Sieg this year compared to last year has been improving drastically. He's only had, I think, 1 or 2 finishes outside the top 12 this year, and has been really, really consistent throughout this year, where I believe right now sits in the top 12 in points and sits in the playoffs currently at the moment. So I think Ryan Sieg is going to be really, really competitive. I think he's a very talented and gifted driver, and I think that Ryan Sieg will be competitive this weekend here at Talladega Super Speedway. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rocket League. Remember last year when Rocket League released the first major patch of the 2021 cars? Well, Rocket League once again is teaming up with NASCAR, and they are going to be releasing a new NASCAR pass that's actually released today as you're currently watching this. They've released a new pass for Rocket League, which features many of the current next-gen cars. There's not a lot of Fords. I think there's a couple Toyotas that they have. There's a lot of Chevys as well. I think it's really awesome to see that Rocket League continues to partner up. I think one thing is really, really cool, and why this is so important is because this can really show kids what NASCAR is about. They're going to see a NASCAR car and say, hey, Where can I watch that? And they say, well, you can watch it on TV every single Sunday or sometimes Saturday night. They can be able to watch it. And in my honest opinion, I think it's really cool that Rocket League continues to partner up with NASCAR. I think it's, again, such a cool addition that Rocket League continues to partner up with NASCAR. I think it's a great thing overall. I'm very, very happy to see that Rocket League continues to partner up and work with NASCAR. I think it's a great thing and very happy to see that for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about BJ McLeod Motorsports. As BJ McLeod Motorsports made an announcement here last night that says that BJ McLeod Motorsports has transferred the 99 points to the 78 car. This means that the 99 car's points, which they were, I think, 34 from the points, those points are getting transferred over to 78 car because Josh Williams has missed multiple races, and Josh Williams currently sits 39th in the owner's points. They're putting him in a better position and putting him 34th in the owner's points, so he has more of a chance of making the field. What this means is that the 99 car is going to end up becoming a part-time car for the rest of the 2022 season. Now, Stephen Parsons is not officially leaving the team anymore. He will still be with the team. In fact, he'll be back next week at Dover in the 99 car. But Stephen did reveal that he has a new opportunity that he's going to be going to. What opportunity is this? He will most likely be going to a new team. It's unclear what team he's going to be going to. It seems like it's a team that might end up being good. I have no clue what it's going to be, but he'll be going to a new team here very, very shortly. So, in my honest opinion, very happy to see that Stefan's got an opportunity. I wish he was driving full-time, but when you get an amazing and a great opportunity, you need to take those chances, and I'm glad to see he's absolutely taking those chances to go ahead and do that. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Dale Jr. Now, it was revealed during the Sunday broadcast that Dale Jr. was going to be joining the Fox Sports booth for this weekend at Talladega. And there were a lot of questions in regards to why Dale Jr. is eligible to go over and work in the Fox Sports booth. Well, something very interesting that was reported by John Irwin, who works at the Sports Business Journal. He reports that Fox and NBC both credit their work on USFL as the main reason why NBC let Dale Jr. go to the Fox Sports booth. And I've been thinking the same thing as well. Remember, the USFL works with not only Fox, but works at NBC as well. They both broadcast all the USFL games this year. And I think because of that, they decided, hey, why not? Let's let Dale Jr. go over and work in Fox. And honestly, I think Fox really needed someone to get into the booth, especially for Talladega, who is going to do really, really well. And Dale Jr. is just that person. Not only is Dale Jr. one of the best drivers in history of Talladega, winning 6 races at Talladega, but Dale Jr. is also a guy who has a lot of commentary experience. And I think the best thing that NBC currently has at the moment, I think is going to be do a really good job. And unlike the other people, I don't think you're going to be seeing him look at his screen. I think he's going to look out the window. I think he's going to see what's going on. And I think he's going to be able to see and pay attention what's going on to the broadcast booth. That's one thing you have to give Dale Jr. a lot of props for. You may not agree with the fact sometimes Dale Jr. can be a little bit loud, it can be a little burdened, but Dale Jr. it always brings that energy. He's kind of getting to that level of Benny Parsons level where Dale Jr. is so memorable. And Dale Jr. has gotten his voice over the last couple of years and has done such a good job in the Fox Sports booth. And I think he's going to continue doing that over the years in NBC and also in other networks. So, very excited this, and I'm glad to see that this is the main reason. I'm thinking this is the same reason as well, but I'm glad to see that they kind of agree with me on as to why Dale Jr. gets to work in the Fox Sports booth. A lot of people were really shocked by that, but there's no legal trouble, and things seem to be good, and Fox appreciates that they're letting Dale Jr. come into the booth. This has been the broadcast that I've generally been most excited about for a very, very long time, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Paretta Autosport. As it was announced today by Paretta Autosport in Indianapolis that Paretta Autosport has landed a 3-race technical alliance with Ed Carpenter Racing for the 2022 season. The all-female team, Paretta Autosport, that attempted to make the Indianapolis 500. I don't remember if they made the Indy 500 or not last year. They will be back once again in 2022, but this time with Ed Carpenter Racing. Now, you would think that they'd be running the Indianapolis 500, but no, the 3 races they're actually planning to run this year are Road America, which is coming up, I believe, on the 3rd of July. Mid-Ohio, well, not Mid-Ohio. Mid-Ohio is the 3rd of July race. Road America, which is about a month or two from now. And then, of course, Nashville Super Speedway, not Nashville Super Speedway, the Nashville Streets of Nashville, the Nashville GP, the Music City Grand Prix. Pret A Hospital, like I said, attempted to make it last year. The all-female team has all-female crew members, all-female individuals that are on the organization. I think this group will be somewhat competitive. They've got Ed Carpenter Racing technology that they're going to be working. I'm surprised they're not putting them on a oval. Ed Carpenter's team seems to be really, really fast on the ovals, but we've also seen Ed Carpenter's team be really, really fast on the road courses. I mean, Rinus VeeKay has gotten a couple road course, I think one road course victory throughout his career. Got that back last year at Indianapolis and has shown some pace there as well. And we've seen Connor Daly do pretty decent as well. And I'm just happy to see that Pret A Autosport is back. I was very intrigued to see if they were going to come back. A big question, though, going on right now, is there going to be a 33rd car for the Indy 500? There's somebody that might end up having a 33rd car. It's unclear who it's going to be, but most likely we're going to have a full field. It's unclear if bumping day is going to happen. We're about a month away from the Indianapolis 500, so the things do absolutely need to get sorted out before that happens, but I am very happy to see that Pret A Autosport is coming back, and they are going to be showing up. I think it's good to see that, and like I said, I'm very, very happy to see that Pret A Autosport is officially coming back to do some work here in IndyCar in 2022. Maybe they'll do an Indy 500 this year. Who really, really knows? I kind of hope that happens. I think it'd be great if they were able to come and do some more IndyCar racing, including the Indianapolis 500. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Truck Bristol Dirt TV ratings. As is revealed earlier today, that NASCAR says that Saturday night's truck race at Bristol Dirt was the most watched truck race at the venue of all time. This is reported by not only Jim Utter, but Adam Stern today. The race earned a 1.1677 million viewers. While this is not the most watched Truck Series race in NASCAR history, this is probably one of the more higher watched Truck Series races in Truck Series history. And I think this really shows a couple things. One, Bristol is here to stay. I think a lot of people are very intrigued by Bristol Dirt, and you also, not to mention, had a couple big factors. Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott was running this event, and Chase Elliott seems to bring a lot of ratings in when he goes out and runs in different series. I think also Joey Logano's fans came out and watched, and I think some of the younger drivers came in as well. And you also had Buddy Cope, which probably brought some of the USAC fans in there as well to watch this event. And it was just generally a really, really good event on Saturday night. So very happy about that for sure, and very glad to see that the Bristol Truck Dirt TV ratings were really, really good. Very excited about that for sure, to be real with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about an off week. Now, Steve O'Donnell was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio earlier today and was talking about the future of Bristol Dirt, which we're going to talk about that later in this video, and also talked about something else that was brought up. Steve O'Donnell was indicating that there might be a second off week in the 2022 season. Now, for this season, 23 season, I should say. Remember, this year in 2022, I know some people say, well, there's an off week after the Clash, but there's only one off week this year on the full points-paying Cup Series schedule, and that's right before the national race. It's the race after Sonoma. They have a 1 week off for Father's Day, and then they come back for the national race to kick off the NBC portion of the schedule, which will be at 5 p.m. Eastern, by the way. This is something I'm really good to see, and don't get me wrong, I think we should get this much of the season done as quick as possible, but I think having 2 off weekends, I think, is a good thing. I know that some fans are not going to be happy by having 2 off weekends, but overall, in my opinion, when it comes to having a second off weekend, I think a lot of people in the industry are going to be much more happier, and they're going to be less crabby about being in the industry, because it seems like, especially with how long the season is in NASCAR currently at the moment right now, it seems like there's a lot of frustration, a lot of people upset with the direction that things are generally going right now. So, again, I'm very happy to see that they're looking at a second off week. I think that we're going to see some changes on the schedule for 2023. We may see a street course race in 2023 as well. There's been some indications around that as well. And we also will be expecting some other stuff that we'll be getting into very, very shortly. But Again, very exciting stuff for sure. Again, I know some people probably won't be happy that they want a second off because it might mean the season goes a little bit longer, but I don't really think that's 100% necessary. Maybe they'll do a doubleheader to kind of condense the season. Maybe they bring back the Pocono doubleheader, but I think that they're going to want to add another track to the schedule going forward. Maybe to get the season a little more condensed, you do a midweek, but again, you have to remember that midweek races have generally not done as good in the past. So again, I'm not entirely sure what exactly is going to happen, but I do hope and pray that we do get to see this happen soon and we go with the schedule, and I hope we do see a second off week here going into 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Bristol Dirt TV ratings. And trust me, this is a big, big win for Easter. And we were very intrigued to see how these ratings were going to be. Well, Adam Stern and multiple other reporters reported today Fox earned a 4.007 million viewers for Sunday night's Bristol Dirt Race, the most watched NASCAR event of any kind at Bristol Motor Speedway since the spring of 2016. NASCAR is currently up from last year to this year, is up 17% in viewership from 2021. Now, first we'll get the thing out of the way with 17%. I do think there's something that is a little bit out of hand. Number one, the Clash is extremely up this year, and Daytona 500 did not have a rain delay compared to the last years. So you kind of have to take that 17% with a grain of salt. But this is something that's so cool. I think the ratings are really, really good here. And there's a couple reasons that things you need to know. Number one, this being the most watched Bristol race in nearly over half a decade since the spring of 2016. That race was not rain delayed, by the way, but that race did not get the greatest ratings of the world. And I think that even with the rain delay, I believe that the ratings could have even been higher. I think some of the rain delays definitely played a major, major factor into why the ratings aren't as high. But again, I think this still is a major wins rating. And honestly, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the second or third or fourth most watched event of this year. It's been going up. You would think that we'd be seeing the numbers drastically go down with the TV ratings, but no, that really isn't happening. They're really flatlining. It's kind of like a roller coaster of it. You've got 1 week it's up, then 1 week it's down, then 1 week it's up, then 2 weeks up, and then you got 2 weeks down, and then you kind of go up once again. And that's a good thing, because right now the ratings were expected this year to be higher, and so far they've been higher. And we're going to Talladega this weekend. Now, the hope is that, because remember, after Talladega, we have 4 straight races where the races are going to be on FS1. So they're going to have to absolutely make sure 100% that it's there, especially with the Miami Grand Prix. We need to talk about this for a second. With Darlington Throwback Race happening, it's happening exactly at the same time as the Darlington Throwback Race, and this is on FS1 compared to NBC. Would not shock me if the Miami GP ends up being very, very close or potentially surpasses NASCAR's ratings. I don't think that'll happen, but that's one thing to watch. But this still, regardless, is an absolute masterclass, big win for NASCAR, and I think Easter racing is to say as well. I know a lot of people are not a fan of racing on Easter, but with how big the ratings are, I think that's going to be something that's going to continue happening over the years and something that will absolutely continue. So, again, very happy to see this for sure. The ratings are up for this weekend. Really great news for sure. And again, it's great to see that the Bristol Dirt TV ratings are up, and I think the future of Bristol Dirt is looking really, really up, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Greg Biffle. As Greg Biffle is once again back this weekend at Talladega, driving the number 44 for NY Racing. This will be the 5th start that NY Racing, I believe, has made this year. They made the first start at Daytona. Then they took a week off at Auto Club. Unfortunately, they had mechanical problems at Daytona. Then at Las Vegas, they attempted to race there as well. They actually had really good speed in practice, but unfortunately, they were not able to qualify. They were not able to have a great qualifying start, and they unfortunately were not able to finish the race. They had more mechanical problems, but they're running decent in the race, but not absolutely great. Then they took another week off, and they came back, I believe, at Atlanta Motor Speedway, where they ended up finishing really good inside the top 20. I know it's technically a super speedway, but they came back and ran well there. And I believe they've taken off really ever since then. They've had a couple starts, too. Actually, they raced at Richmond, where I think they had some mechanical problems, or they were just really off the pace and were slow. I think they ended up falling out of the race. Now, this, again, is a super speedway race for Greg Biffle that is going to be competing in. I'm also excited to see what paint scheme exactly Greg Biffle is going to have this week. And considering Greg Biffle's had college fantasy games all year long, it may be Alabama, perhaps. It would probably most likely be an HBCU university, since John Cohen owns a team, is partnered up with the HBCU universities. But every time I see Greg Biffle on the entries, I always get really, really excited, and it also increases the entry fields. Which this week we don't have a full field for Talladega, but we nearly have a full field with 39 cars showing up. You've got Noah Gragson at 6'2" with that really awesome looking Wendy's car. You've got J.J. Illing in the 55 for MBM Motorsports. They actually will make their second start of the year, which is great to see. And the first time the 55 car has been out there. And of course, you've got some other cool drivers like Landon Cassill being back this weekend, among some other things. I think, like I said, having Greg Biffle back in the series is really, really cool, and I'm very excited to see these games back. And I think, like I said, I think Greg Biffle could be competitive. We saw MI Racing really run in the top 20. They had speed in practice and were not off the pace really that much. And if they don't have engine problems, they don't have issues like they had at Daytona, I can see Greg Biffle being very competitive, since RCR cars have generally been really, really fast. And what partnership they have, MI Racing does, they've got partnership with RCR. So in my opinion, I'm very excited to see that Greg Biffle is back this weekend. Having him in a series is always a great thing. And he's back this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are now talking about Bristol Dirt. As it was announced today, and as expected, that Bristol Motor Speedway will be prepared for a spring and night race in 2023, giving the fans two great NASCAR shows on two different services. What this means is, yes, it's confirmed that Bristol is officially coming back in 2023. This is absolutely a great thing. Now, one thing to be very important to note is that most likely it's going to be on Easter. And I believe next year Easter is in late March or early April. I think it's like the first or second week of April next year. So it is going to be earlier in the year. And what's one of the big concerns of Easter being that day? One of the big concerns is the potential issues of weather. Weather always seems to be a concern for the spring Bristol race. Now, they can't just move the race up to the day and they're going to run it at night. They need to run it at night and do things better. There are things that absolutely they can do that are going to help Bristol Dirt overall. Number one, they can do a much better job when it comes to, putting on a product, getting the track prepared a lot better. One thing is, don't wet the track before you go out there. Don't wet the track the night before, especially if rain's in the forecast. Don't wet the track the night before. Yes, you don't want the track absolutely dry, so dust isn't coming up, but you don't want the track dry. Try too wet. You know why? Because it's going to cause a lot of mud, and you don't want a ton of mud. But there was some mud, but some teams also messed up on the grills. Also, make teams have a mandated grill. I know it's optional, but make some teams have a mandated grill to where that could be fixed. Also, windshields need to be gone. I think windscreens and windshields need to be gone, and they need to have like the cages and the roll cages, wherever those things are, in front of the cars. It is for the modifieds, and I think that's one thing that they can do to improve the racing. But it seems like drivers, though, are also more open to having this race as well. Kyle Larson was very against this race, and he seen it originally earlier in the week. But after the race on Sunday night, he was really pumped up and really, really excited and enjoyed what he saw. Kyle Busch wasn't overwhelmingly negative. He was somewhat negative, but he wasn't overwhelmingly the most negative. He said that there were some positives with that as well. Kevin Harvick seemed to be the most negative. Seemed like we never should do this again. Well, Kevin Harvick, my friend, especially with how good the TV ratings were this weekend, they're coming back. Whether you like Bristol Dirt or not, and I'll tell you this, originally I was not a fan of continuing to do Bristol Dirt after the first year, but again, I was not originally a fan of them converting this to Bristol Dirt. Originally I thought maybe long-term they could do it, but not right away. But after this, the first year I saw the race, and I was like, okay, I'm open to it, but again, I'm still rather have two concrete days. But after how good the racing was, I know there's some issues that they absolutely need to fix going forward, but after all the issues that they genuinely had, I think that this year they did a much better job with it. And again, I think the racing was better, and I know they had some issues, procedural problems. I know there were some complaints around the procedure, and I think that's one thing that they can fix going forward next year. And I'm absolutely down with it for more reasons. Number one, it gives more diversity on the schedule. The more diverse the schedule is to me, the better it's going to be, because it's going to create more challenges. You have so many different types of tracks and so many different preferences of tracks that you are able to have and are able to race on. So this, in my opinion, is absolutely a great thing they're doing. And again, Bristol coming back, I'm 1,000% for it. returning in 2023, but y'all better try to get out there. Attendance was better this year. It wasn't amazing, but I do think that if they can get the attendance out there better, and I think a lot of it was probably because some people probably weren't able to make it out because it was Easter. There wasn't a lot of talk around it. Again, Easter wasn't the time. And I think that this year going forward, with them having, again, because last year they didn't announce the date before. Now we need to figure out exactly what date it is. They need to really announce which dates are because they did not reveal the dates. They need to figure out exactly what date it is so people exactly know and can set their plans up. But like I said, I'm very happy to see that Bristol is coming back, and I'm glad to see we're going to see it next year in 2023. So anyway, that's today's Lawn NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as for me on page as well. Let's get you over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Bristol returning in 2023? Are you a fan of it returning or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed in today's episode, including Grey Biffle returning at Talladega this weekend? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're most likely going to be having a my top 10 favorite NASCAR drivers of 2022. I'm not sure if that will be the video. I'll most likely pull it out and see if you guys want that video, but that most likely will be the video. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time with some great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.